next wonderful speaker is the amazing Yuen Li. She is from Malaysia, but also now living in the USA, in the south of Florida, south of New Orleans.
South of New Orleans, yes.
Yeah, south of New Orleans. Sorry about that. And she's involved with two companies. She has Nomad Adventures, which is based in Malaysia. And she has single-handedly brought rock climbing to Malaysia at the end of last century. And she's been doing amazing things with rock climbing and getting people to experience the outdoors in Malaysia. And then her new adventure is the Phoenix Waste Solutions, where they are working on solutions, this technology, incredible green technology, to be able to turn trash into ash and energy without putting any energy into it. So it's an incredible journey that Yuen Li is on. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Cathy. It's very exciting to be a part of this summit.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much for joining us, because you're going to be talking today about outdoor education and the importance of that. So before we start on that, what are the challenges that you see in the current education system?
Oh, well, I think, the current education system really focuses a lot on the whole questions, when we look at questions, right, there's how, what, who, and when, right? So the current conventional education really segregates who. It's all about who is qualified to do what, and then that you can only do accounting if you study accountancy, or you can only be an artist if you studied art, and it's a very segregated way of compartmentalizing skills. And certainly there's a whole idea about when you have to do your all these different grades before you get qualified to do something. Just last night I was talking to my team, and they sort of said, what makes us qualified to teach first aid? Said, because you've been doing it for 5 years, that's what makes you qualified. Oh, but who needs to say it? Well, as long as you do it, it's better than not doing first aid. So I think there's this whole idea that we have to get this piece of paper and have a very kind of formal style of education, which is a little old-fashioned, I think. And I think there are certain areas where a certain level of formality is important, but also it's very important just to get people to be able to think out the box, and not to be constrained by, oh, I don't have this piece of paper, therefore I can't do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, depending on the different countries that we're in, and the industries that we're in, there are pieces of paper that we do have to have. But what you're talking about goes beyond that, isn't it? It's about developing the skills, not in order to get the piece of paper, but in order because they are useful for us. Then we need those things. Then we're wanting to do them then, and that's why we would learn those.
Absolutely. And, it's about practical living skills. I think there are a lot of places in the world where people are just kind of waiting to have that piece of paper before they are allowed to do anything. Honestly, they're being overtaken by the people who've decided, well, you know what, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. And that's exactly one of the things that my son said, my youngest son last year. He talked about, I've got this piece of paper now, I've studied at school for 13 years and I've got this piece of paper now, but what does it allow me to do? Well, I can go to university, or I can go and get a trade, go and learn a trade, or I can make coffee and work retail. And, he sort of looked at this piece of paper and said, what value is it? How can I actually use this piece of paper now? How does it lead into the next things that I'm wanting to do? So he was really questioning so many things about education in that time. And still.
Yeah, I mean, as you brought out, and I kind of tossed out that whole thing about first aid and all of that. Now, I'm not saying that it's not important to have proper training and to have a certain level of competencies and certain ways to assess those competencies. But at the same time, that we also have to recognize how by only having those standards and having all those standards, the only ones that are important, how disempowering that is. I remember one evening, kind of being very fortunate enough to talk to this this native person in Malaysia, and I was just sat there. We were in this evening in the jungle, and this guy had so much knowledge. He knew like what plants could be eaten in the jungle, and what when if you needed to plant this bamboo, you needed to do it in this time of the month. When the moon was at this level and not there, otherwise the bamboo that would grow up wouldn't be as fertile. And the amount, the volume of knowledge that he knew was just amazing. Yet in our modern society, that knowledge is not given a lot of value or seen as being lesser. But just in terms of the richness of his knowledge, there was no doubt about it. But we do have this way of saying this kind of knowledge is more important and this kind of knowledge isn't. Making coffee can, as your son said, it can be an art, and it can be highly, highly valued, and highly, certainly in the morning, it's the most important skill that anyone can present to me. But at the same time, it's seen as like, oh, okay, well, you didn't get your A levels, you kind of, just barely scraped through your O levels, so you can make coffee. But, it can be an art, it can be an absolute form of expression for someone, right? Yeah. And so how, we have this weird way in society of valuing some kinds of knowledge as more valuable than others. The education system, the current education system, certainly emphasizes that rather than offering more alternatives.
And that's exactly some of the conversations that we've been having over these 3 days is what does success look like? What is important? What does success look like for our people coming through the school system, for our teachers, for our parents? What do we want our education system to do for our people? Okay, so today I want to head into today's topic, which is outdoor education. Play, dare, and manifest your future. So let's start with the importance of outdoor education. Why is outdoor education so important, do you reckon?
So, when you said you're going to ask me that question of why is outdoor education so important, I was like, okay, I have to really think very seriously about this. And I was kind of trying to think of something clever. Well, it occurred to me that the answer is in the question itself. Why is outdoor education important? And, I think, in personal development, we talk a lot about, knowing your why and then following your why. And it's all important. You must know your why and you must follow it. And then it's this way, if you know your why, your life will be turbocharged with meaning and things will just fall into place. Yet we never teach our young people how to find their why. And, during the pandemic, one of the first courses said, all right, let's go online and let's do this. And people must find their why. And one of the very first programs I ran, it's like, okay, let's all look at your why. And they all kind of looked at me and like, well, I don't really know what is my why. And it's like, well, why don't you know what's your why? And then I thought about it. And it's like, well, for a lot of people, they've never been given permission to explore what is their why. And more importantly than that, they've never been taught the skills to explore what is their why, right? As we said, conventional education always, it's all about how, it's all about what, it's all about who, it's all about when. And we kind of assume that, you will figure out your why. But, knowing your why.
And just when we're talking about the why, for those people that may not understand that, what we're talking about is understanding what you care about, isn't it? Understanding what are the things that matter to you. What is your purpose? And there's so many people asking, what's the purpose of life at the moment? And when you're talking about finding your why, you're talking about learning what's deep inside you that matters. What are the things that you care about?
Exactly. Exactly. So, finding your purpose, and it's almost become this, it's like this little, what do they call it? Little sticker that you put on your bumper sticker, like, oh, find your purpose. And then, you'll know it, and everything will fall into place once you found your purpose. And, the number of young people who are in absolute crisis because they don't know what is their purpose. And we kind of say it so glibly, right? Like, find your purpose. Well, you'll know it, just follow your purpose and then you'll be fine. And they're kind of looking around helpless, like, but I don't know what it is. And it's actually very disconcerting and very disempowering. I mean, imagine if you're the person who doesn't know what their purpose is, they always feel that they're the only person in the whole world who doesn't know, and everyone else is kind of charging along, and they all have their purpose, and that's the definition of depression, right? When you feel you're the only one in the world who doesn't know what your purpose is.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're talking there about young people and not knowing their why. But I know actually many adults who are still trying to figure out what they're meant to be doing. So this is part of this, isn't it? We've been following along through this education system that's taught us a whole lot of stuff, told us that this stuff here is important to learn and that we're going to be, judged as successful as to whether or not we can do that. And then we go from there into work. But we're left sort of empty, aren't we? Because
Absolutely. Yeah. And our life is just filled with, pursuing these answers to, when, who, how, endlessly, right? How, and who do I get to help me with it? Who's qualified to do this? Or when can this happen? And we don't even begin to explore the question why. And we don't even that whole exploration of that sense of purpose. And, I think for me, I certainly found a lot of purpose through adventure activities. Adventure was what kind of, saved my life by kind of, bringing me home, right? And it's like how so when I kind of in that program I was sharing, when I was like, well, look, everyone, why don't you know what's your why? And I thought about it. So what do people need to? What are the skills? What are the components that you need to understand in order to find their why? Right? They need to have. And I thought it was the two. And I kind of boiled it down to two things. In order to find your why, for you to find your purpose, you need to have two things: the ability to dream and the ability to care. And these two things kind of go hand in hand. And it's so sad, isn't it, that so much of education has squashed that ability to dream. And that's what you're talking about being feeling empty, right, Cathy?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that. So when I think about what is adventure, adventure is that classic definition of adventure, to journey beyond the horizon, and to find that thing that is not seen yet, and to discover that, to discover beyond the horizon, and that is kind of the definition of dreaming.
Yeah, being able to think beyond the here and now, isn't it? Being able to think of a future state where different things happen, different possibilities, and all of the rest of it. So when we're talking about outdoor education in particular, we're talking about some pretty big concepts here, aren't we? The sort of the idea of adventure and so on. But outdoor education doesn't have to be the big things either, does it? It can be, there can be smaller aspects as part of that outdoor education. I know when we were talking before, you talked about the importance of being able to walk barefoot because you're experiencing the ground and things like that. And this is all part of that outdoor education as well, isn't it? So tell us a little bit about that. Why is this sort of stuff is important to us?
I think, I think outdoor education encompasses so much, right? It encompasses from, that expedition that people, climbing Everest, or, that massive, peak experience in your life, where you're doing something that's never been done before, that impossible next frontier. But it's also in this, as you said, it's also in the small things. It's also in, the walk that you take in your garden, and then just kind of pausing and being able to see that little flower and like, oh, wait a minute, there's that little tiny little flower, and oh, look at that, there's a little bug that's kind of walking around that flower, and maybe just kind of paying attention to those small things. So it encompasses many aspects. It encompasses nature. It encompasses a certain appreciation of the environment. It encompasses a lot of like basic skills, like lighting a fire, or do something very complex, like paddling down a grade 5 river. So it's a huge spectrum of activities, and I think outdoor education goes, as I said, from very complex expeditions to simple, half-day walks in, to the local forest reserve, and just kind of getting kids out and just enjoying nature.
Because one of the things that it does is it provokes curiosity, doesn't it? And that's what we had one of our speakers, the wonderful Karen Tui Boys, and she was talking about the habits of mind, and the importance of that curiosity, the importance of the awe and wonder. And we get so much possibility for that as we're out in the outdoors, isn't there? As we see the beauty of different aspects of nature. And we're also talking about developing that idea of caring. You talked about the importance of dreaming. You talked about the importance of caring. And I think it's through these experiences where we're not rushed, where we're able to just be in nature and to allow ourselves to be able to think, to experience, to just be, that we can find that curiosity provoked. I know one day my son found a centipede on the floor. He was about 4 years old, and he found a centipede that was about 10 centimeters long. And he was like, what's this? What's this? What's this? And, so the exploration that went on from that, the questions, is it a centipede or a millipede? And what do they eat? And, what's the difference between them? And the difference in the shape of them, how many legs they've got, what they might eat. And, that curiosity was certainly provoked just by seeing the centipede. And for some years there, he was really fascinated by insects. And so each time he saw an insect, he'd want to know, as much about it as he could find out. And this is what we're talking about, isn't it? It's not stuff that we're teaching in the classroom. It's stuff that we're experiencing and then having that curiosity aroused.
Yes. So I was thinking about that whole, the ability to dream, and, kind of the idea of it being beyond the horizon. But adventure is also very grounded, right? And that's, and it's a very grounded proposition. It's not just about, beyond the horizon there and there and there, but it's from here to there, right? And that's where your curiosity comes in. It's like, well, what is beyond that? I'm here, what's there, and that stirring of that curiosity is the beginnings of adventure, of that adventure mindset that people embrace. And I also think of that ability to dream as the ability to join certain dots from your here to that bit that you can't see, right? I see this millipede here in my now, but what other insects, animals, creepy crawlies are there out there that I don't know of, and how do I join the dots from the knowledge that I have for my current present to a knowledge that I can't, of something I can't even see. Yes. And and never kind of understood that whole process of joining the dots. I mean, Steve Jobs talked about it in his like famous the last speech he ever gave in his life. And he said, so how did you do it? And he said, basically by joining the dots, right? And if we can follow those dots with our curiosity, with our sense of adventure, with our sense of purpose, then it leads us to some incredible places.
And I think one of the things that's really interesting when you're talking about joining the dots is often those dots being joined can only be seen later in our lives. And so, it's like we're sowing seeds through these experiences in the outdoors. We don't know what's going to come of them, right? But later on in our lives, we can be able to say, oh, this happened because of this, this provoked this curiosity. And so I've ended up following this track, this journey.
And that's the adventure of it all, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is the stuff that because there's so many people don't have the opportunity for these outdoor adventures, it makes it difficult for people to have these experiences.
Yes, because you have to be able to see how to join the dots, and you have to have a kind of a clear realization of where you are, where those dots are for you, and above all, you have to have that courage to follow those dots.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that outdoor education certainly helps with, isn't it? You've done a lot of rock climbing, and I know that there are people listening that have also done rock climbing. My youngest son is a rock climber, and he talks about the problem solving, the mindset, the resilience that he has had to develop through that. Every single climb is a challenge. Every single climb you need to be able to think about and then to be able to get in there and do. And so he has learned so much about his own abilities, his own physical ability, and that the importance of practicing those skills in order to be able to get better.
Yeah, so the word practicing, so you have the ability to dream, but you have to practice it. You have to exercise that muscle. You have to exercise that ability to connect those dots. You have to exercise that ability you have to exercise your courage muscle a little bit. And yeah, it's all, I mean, it's a practice. It's not just a one-time realization. It's a practice that you have to visit and revisit over and over again. Yeah, I as a rock climber, I've been fortunate enough to do quite a lot of first ascents. Like the first time, so, the first time a climb is climbed, right? You establish a rock climb. And typically this is done by very good climbers. Now, I'm far from being a very good climber, but I do have this particular, weirdly, I have this particular skill of being able to see things where people couldn't see before. And, time and time again, I would go to the cliff and sort of like, there'd be a very established climb here that everyone's climbing and a very established climb here that everyone's climbing, and they're all enjoying it. And I'll kind of look at the bit in between and like, oh, hang on, wait a minute. Like, look, there's a pocket there that you can actually, that no one's actually seen. And, there's a ledge there that's used by this climb. But if instead of you holding it like this, you put your foot against it like that, and you use it in a different way, and that will allow you to do this, and then you can do this, and then you can find your way and connect those dots and create that opportunity for yourself. So, I think that's why you try to exercise that that sense ability to dream, because then you can see opportunities where no one else has seen them before.
And that's bringing
great application in life, in business, in your future.
And that ability to try again and again and again, isn't it? Because I know quite a few people in that rock climbing space, they work on a project for several months before they actually succeed. And so it is, again, time and time and time and time and time again, practicing it, building your muscles, building that patience, building that resilience. And these are all skills that we need in every single area of our lives. There's so many people that when it gets hard, when the going gets tough, they give up. But what we're learning through this outdoor education and through these experiences is about our own ability to push through, our own resilience, our own sense of pride in our achievements, feeling good about ourselves.
Yes, so that resilience theme is very common in outdoor education, and it's very, it's something that can often be a little bit misinterpreted or a little bit misunderstood. I remember when I was 16 years old, my first ever time when I was a outdoor instructor, I was like, my first course, I was sitting there waiting in the car park, waiting for the students to come. And this mother marches up, she's like, grabs her child, she's like pulling her child, the child's got this big backpack, like bigger than him. And then she pulls, are you an instructor? I'm like, yes. She said, well, this is my son, and I want you to make him suffer, okay? You hear me? Make him suffer in the camp. And, it's like, yeah, as long as he comes back and he's suffered. And there's this idea that if we build up the resilience of children, it's a good thing, right? And it's kind of an interesting concept. When we look back on our camp experiences, when we look back, and all our buddies, we come up 20 years later, and we talk back about the summer camp that we had, or that river trip that we had, or the epic rock climbing. There's always this kind of ghastly recounting of like, and you remember how cold it was, and you remember the food, we opened the food and it was frozen, and did you remember this, and how stinky the socks were, and how cramped the tent was. I mean, this whole recounting we relish it, right? So that it's part of the whole mythology of outdoor education. It's, when Charles Dickens wrote, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, he could have been talking about the summer camp, right? Everyone's summer camp. And that's, somehow or other that sticks with us. in America, they talk about it. Of course, they have a slogan for it in America. And they talk about embrace the suck, learn to embrace the suck. And I certainly think that's a very important skill, and just that whole aspect of it is, how do you teach it? It's something that you just have to experience, right? It's just something you have to go through. And I think that's the power of outdoor education. But there's also a gentler aspect of it. So you have this, very tough, embrace the suck aspect of it. And the more gentle and the more kind of philosophical part of it is, they talk about the philosophy of challenge by choice. How do you make the concept of challenge appealing so that people would want to take on challenge, so that they realize the value of challenge and they willingly take on challenges. I was fortunate enough to do a raft guide training in Bosnia, and they talked about how these Russian tourists would come over, into Eastern Europe, and all these Russians, they would go rafting, right? They were like, oh, this rafting's amazing, and then the raft guides will give out paddles to the Russian tourists, and the Russian tourists will look at these paddles and were like, why you give me paddle? I pay ticket. Why you give me paddle, right? And they didn't understand, like what? I've just paid for this whitewater rafting trip and you want me to work? But it's just part of adventure, right? That you embrace that hard work. You embrace that fullness of the experience is when you're the one doing it. You're the one setting up your tents and cooking your own meals and doing all that. So that's part of the magic of outdoor education. We talk about, so it's not just a random group of activities where people just end up having to embrace the suck, but it's a carefully crafted sequence of activities where people realize the value of challenge, and they decide to make a choice to take on challenges, and then they learn to exercise that muscle.
And they also grow in confidence as they do that, because they end up being able to do things, or finding that they can do things that they never ever thought that they could. I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or learning to say no when they need to, to say like, no, I can't do this. And we talked about courage and rock climbing and all of that. But my hardest lessons actually have been to sort of say, I just can't do this, and it's dangerous if I continue, and I need to stop and turn back and just say, like, sorry, let's go back. And those have been the most bitter lessons that I've learned. But in those moments, I knew that I was absolutely making the best choice ever, and learning to embrace using your judgment in that way.
Yeah, that's interesting that you talk about that, because it's through those sorts of experiences, knowing your body, knowing your limits, that you stay alive. Because there are countless climbers that have climbed Mount Everest but not made it down, because they shouldn't have finished the climb. They should have turned around and come back before the top because of where their body was at. So, that knowledge of how far you can go, what your limits are, and not being stupid with it. Is a really, really important lesson that we only learn by practicing these muscles, using these muscles and challenging ourselves.
Yes, and the whole business of risk, right? And how in climbing, the number of people have come, I've come down from a rock climb and they scolded me, right? Like, what are you doing? Like, it's so dangerous. It's like, well, not dangerous for me because, I've built up certain skills and I know how to manage those risks. But at the same time, I've not eliminated the risks. I can only manage them, and I can manage them better and better. But at no time must I ever pretend that I've managed to eliminate the risks.
Yeah. And that's a really important lesson for us all, because there's so many people that are trying to eliminate risk for children. You look at our playgrounds around the world and how much risk has been taken out of it, and yet children need that risk. They need to be able to have that element of risk in their play, to be able to challenge themselves.
Absolutely. I kind of want to go back to that, the ability to dream and the ability to care, right? And so, that, how people want to kind of wrap up their kids in cotton wool, and they believe that that's caring for their child. And I don't really know how to, I was thinking about it. It was like, I very confidently wrote down, in my notes, the ability to care, as if I knew how to make people care. I mean, honestly, if I knew how to make people care, I would sell that tablet to, every parent of every teenage kid, and I would make, billions of dollars. What I do know about the ability to care is that it must come from a place of authenticity. It happens in, the ability to care only happens in an authentic space, right? And the moment that space has, lacks authenticity, people can sniff it out. They know that it's not caring, it's just going through the motions, right? So the ability to care, it has to happen in an authentic space. And when we think of all the learning environments that that we as human beings or educators try to create, we've never managed to create a learning space that's more authentic than nature. Right? The mountain doesn't care, how rich you are when you climb the mountain, or how many Facebook friends you have, that it's going to be as hard for everyone, whether you've got 1,000 followers on your Facebook or one, or it's going to be just as hard for you to climb that mountain. So there's a level of authenticity in nature that you can't, puts you in that authentic space immediately, and it's in that space when caring happens that that it's very powerful caring.
And I'm thinking of some of those trips that you've done with the rock climbers, and rock climbers put their lives in the hands of other rock climbers through the belaying system. And it's the same no matter what sort of team sports we're playing. A team sport, you're only as strong as the weakest player as a team. And so the teams that do really well, they look after each other in that team, don't they?
Yeah, and you can talk about and deliver 20 million lectures on caring, but until you have been hiking up a mountain on a hot day and you've run out of water, and then you realize you don't have water, and then you turn around and you realize your teammate is sharing their last mouthful of water in their water bottle with you, and you're so humbled by that, and they reach out, and it's only then that you really understand what caring is.
And there's that authenticity again there. So one of the things that you talk about also is the power of play. So tell us about what you believe is the power of play.
Oh, for sure we have forgotten how to play in nature, right? We're so busy learning how to play like this and getting our scores and all of that. So, one of the things about outdoor sports is that it's not competitive, not with each other anyway. You're always competing with yourself, and you're always kind of trying to, get better, and kind of play that competition game with yourself. There's something about nature that just is a very authentic level of play. Well, first of all, you don't have a bunch of things. There's just nature, sticks, grass, earth, slope, and requires you to be very imaginative if you of how you interact with that environment. We have definitely forgotten how to play in the great outdoors, in play in nature. And we've forgotten, we need all these props, and we need all these different gadgets to make play happen for us. And yet the simplest kind of play is just a bunch of kids chasing each other around a field, right? That's the most, simplest form of play. I think we need to rediscover some of that.
Because it's that freedom, isn't there? The freedom where you haven't got any predetermined outcomes. The other thing about this is that it takes time. It's not, right, go outside and have 3 minutes and have your experience and then come back in and do some proper learning. It does require that time to be able to slow down and to touch base with what we're actually seeing out there. And that's not always easy in this world.
Yes. So one of the powerful things about nature is that how it just gets us to connect, right? To connect to, when it's, the number of people who've asked me, like, is it dark at night? Is it going to be dark when I go camping at night? We're like, yeah, it is. And we've just so lost touch with these natural rhythms, the natural rhythms of time, the natural rhythms of the day, the natural rhythms of the season. I think it's very, very important that we learn how to reconnect with that. What is the time? The time is, when the wind comes, or the time is when the tide's out, right? So it's not just a clock time. but it's also a time that makes, when is the time that you can sail? The time is that you can sail is when the wind is right and the tide is right. It's not determined by a clock. And so how do we listen to these cues? How do we cue ourselves to nature rather than have time cue it to ourselves? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And so we're learning how to observe, aren't we? We're learning how to watch and learning to use our eyes to see different signals and things than we may have been exposed to before then. And so much of this learning, I was talking to somebody recently, and they were talking about the importance of experiential learning. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, isn't it? This actually feeling things, of actually seeing things and taking that time to experience it and think about what does it mean and what am I going to do with this information, not just learn this, see that leaf over there, what type of leaf is it? It's provoking that curiosity and then going, okay, where to from here, asking those questions.
Absolutely. It's kind of like if people don't experience that sense of wonder, and they don't experience that sense of humility in nature, and they don't experience the sense of, I don't know, impatience that like, the tide is out and I can't paddle fast enough, so I'm stuck behind this sandbank here. They don't experience that. How do you actually learn it? It's like trying to explain the color blue to someone who's blind, right? I guess what isn't an experience? I mean, if you want to really talk about, experience, so you can read something theoretical in a book, and it can be an experience. You're kind of sitting and thinking about something. I'm not saying that's not an experience. That is an experience, right? Just a very theoretical experience. But what we're talking about is experiences that are very real, are very authentic, are very immediate, very profound, and very impactful. And there's nothing like them. When you're on the river and you're gripping your paddle and your knuckles are as white as the water around you, and you have cold water splashing in your face, and you're breathing in, or you're underwater and you're trying to come up and you're breathing in that oxygen, or you're in a cave and you're walking through a cave, and that sense of darkness that is so thick that you can almost cut it with a knife. How do you explain those experiences? You can't. You can only experience those experiences. And somehow, we are profoundly changed by that. In outdoor education, we talk about how, the mountains speak for themselves. Let the mountains speak for themselves, and you will uncover those lessons. So, that in that connection, in that moment of connection, when we realize, our space our place in the universe, it gives us this incredibly profound learning. Find it very difficult to explain in words sometimes. You just have to go out and experience it.
And I think you've just captured it in an absolute nutshell there. What you've just described is capturing everything there. The importance of actually getting out and experiencing it and the learning.
Because I think we reconnect, right? We reconnect with something profound. Sometimes what we find that what we reconnect with is ourselves, and that's the piece that was missing all along.
Absolutely. Okay, last question. You talk about manifesting an aspiration.
I think of outdoor education. When we talk about the hero's journey, right? That's in all stories, right? The hero's journey of the hero kind of following these rites of passage and going through all these different experiences and coming and experiencing a transformation and coming back. It's the story of every outdoor education trip. It's every river, every rock climb is a hero's journey. Every trip down the river or a journey through a cave is a hero's journey. Whether it's a 2-hour journey or a 10-month-long expedition, right? It's a hero's journey because we're transformed by it. And I think I think there are physical things that you have to manifest. You have to make it happen. You have to go through that. It is a journey that you manifest in a very physical way. So, you learn to, pack your backpack or coil your rope or learn to tie the knots that will keep you safe as you climb up the mountain. There's a very physical level of manifestation. So there are very practical skills that you learn. How do I ration for 7 days of food on my expedition? How do I make sure that food actually becomes edible dinners? How do I manifest those? But I think there's also, going back to that idea of the ability to dream. It's how do you manifest your dreams? How do you manifest that adventure that we have that's inside our hearts, and make it into a reality for us. So I think that's what outdoor education brings. I think that's what adventure brings. It brings us into ourselves. At the end of the day, what is it that we manifest? Our dreams, our very selves, our very being, right? That's what we manifest.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your stories today around the importance of outdoor education. And I'd love it actually if you could ask one last question. What do you hope that people have gained from today? And then we can put that in the Facebook group and get people to comment on the thing that they've taken the most from your talk today. What would be that question that you've got for people that you'd want to know the answer to?
For the longest time, I often thought that my journey through adventure, right? My journey with adventure was only something for me. And then when I started connecting with people like you and realizing that, hey, what I'm saying isn't just some kooky idea that, Yuen Li sat in the corner and thought about. And I guess what I'd like to find out is, does it connect? Does it connect with you? There's this wild idea that I have strike a chord. And I would love to know that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing again, as I've just said before, but thank you so much for sharing as being as part of the summit and being so passionate about the importance of outdoor education, because I too believe that it is really important for our young people.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Cathy, for the whole world, right? Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.